So what if belief wasn't something you just find? What if it's something you actually use? And what if reality itself is, well, a whole lot more flexible than we've been led to believe? Today, we're going to dive into a pretty wild system of thought, one that sees the universe less like a set of rules you have to follow and more like a blank canvas waiting for you to create something. This is a look at the mechanics of chaos magic.
All right, nothing is true, everything is permitted. Now, I know what you might be thinking. That sounds intense, maybe even a little dangerous, right? But hang on. The sources are really clear on this. This isn't about anarchy or saying that nothing matters. Not at all. Think of it more like a declaration of independence. It's about radical freedom from rigid, dogmatic beliefs. It's basically the ultimate permission slip to experiment with reality. And this is where it gets really practical, getting right into the core philosophy, the Principia Chaotica. It basically frames belief itself as a kind of technology. Yeah, a technology. Think of it like a tool, like a hammer or a piece of software. It's something you consciously decide to pick up to get a specific job done. The whole question changes from, okay, is this belief true in some absolute sense, to, hey, is this belief useful for what I'm trying to do right now? Big difference. And that idea creates this huge contrast with how we normally think, doesn't it? I mean, most of us operate with what you could call fixed beliefs. These are the ideas we hold on to as like permanent, unshakable truths about the world. But this framework, it's all about tool beliefs. You adopt one for a little while to achieve a specific effect, and then you just put it down. You set it aside, just like you would with any other tool when you're done with the job.
Okay, so if belief is a tool, then what's actually in the toolbox? Let's get into it. We're talking about the 8 colors of magic.
Now, the sources frame this in a really cool way. Don't think of these as like separate, rigid schools of magic. It's much more like a painter's palette. Each color isn't some strict discipline you have to master. Nope, it's more like a shade of energy. And each one is tied directly to a fundamental part of what makes us human. Our instincts, our drives, our deepest emotions. And you can see exactly how this works in practice right here. So for example, you've got red magic. That taps into our raw instinct for aggression, and you might use it for something like self-defense. Then there's green magic, which channels our need for love and social connection to build loyalty. Blue magic is all about communication and acquiring knowledge. Yellow taps into that self-preservation instinct to boost your charisma, while orange can get into deception and trickery to kind of shape how people see things. See the pattern? Every core human drive has its own magical application. All right, so we've got the philosophy and we've got the toolkit. But the big question remains, how does a spell actually work? Let's look at the blueprints, the actual physics of a spell. Okay, this is where things get really, really fascinating for me. According to the source text, the Octovo, a spell isn't just wishful thinking. It lays out this whole kind of pseudoscientific model for how magic works. The argument is that a successful spell isn't some random accident or a divine miracle. No, it's a calculated operation. It's treated almost like an engineering problem with its own set of physics and even its own equations. And here it is, the first equation of magic. Psi equals G times L times S times B. That Greek letter, psi, that represents the total magic you have available for whatever you're trying to do, and it's calculated by multiplying these 4 key ingredients, G, L, S, and B. Now here's the kicker. If any single one of those components is 0, well, the whole thing becomes 0. The spell just fizzles out, fails completely. So what are these letters? Well, S stands for subliminalization, which is basically encoding your desire into a symbol. B is for belief, your raw conviction that it's going to work. But the two most complex and maybe the most important factors here are G for gnosis, which is a very special state of consciousness, and L for link, which is your connection to whatever you're targeting. So let's really zoom in on those two for a minute. Okay, first up, gnosis. You can think of this as the engine of the spell. It's this heightened state of total single-pointed awareness. It's that moment when your internal dialogue, all that constant chatter and nagging doubt in your head, it just goes silent. And you can get there in a couple of ways. You can use what are called inhibitory methods, like super deep meditation, or you can use ecstatic methods, like really intense emotion or arousal. The whole point is to bypass your conscious critical mind and plant your intention straight into the subconscious. All right, so next up, how does the spell actually find its target? Well, that's the L, the link. And what's really interesting here is that the system kind of throws out a lot of the old mystical ideas like the astral plane and instead borrows concepts from modern physics. The ideas that magic doesn't work through a simple, direct A causes B kind of way. Instead, it works by subtly influencing probabilities. It's about nudging the universe toward the outcome you want. Think of it less like throwing a rock at a target and more like creating a resonance that makes a specific event just a little more likely to happen. So, we've looked at the philosophy, the tools, and the mechanics. But what's the whole point of all this? Why do it? Let's zoom out from just casting spells and talk about the bigger picture, a path of self-creation. The ultimate goal here is a process they call illumination. But it's really important to understand that this isn't some final destination, you know? It's not like you get there and boom, you're enlightened. Game over. The framework describes it as an ongoing, continuous, dynamic journey. It's all about personal growth, about evolution, and about gaining a deeper and deeper understanding of yourself and how reality works.
And ultimately, what's called high magic in this system, it actually shifts the focus away from just personal gain. The real aim becomes consciously increasing what the source calls integrated information, represented by the Greek letter phi. And what does that mean? Well, it means contributing to the world's collective pool of knowledge and art and discovery. And at the same time, it's about elevating the complexity and the quality of your own consciousness. And this quote really brings us full circle, doesn't it? The whole philosophy kicks off by dissolving this idea that you have a fixed, permanent self. And yeah, that can be a pretty terrifying thought, right? But the system suggests that the best response to that realization isn't despair, it's laughter, it's a sense of play. Because it's not actually a loss, it's a liberation. If you don't have a real self that's set in stone, that means you're totally free to constantly create and recreate who you are. Which leaves us with this final question, and it really gets right to the heart of everything we've talked about. The core idea presented in these sources is that belief isn't passive. It's an active, powerful, creative force. So, if you could really choose your beliefs like you choose your tools, what kind of reality would you decide to build? What would you create?